So I want to quick show how I'm tracking some events on this page, and then discuss a little bit about the implementation. So on the right side, I have my record, my personal record in a Mautic server, and on the left side, I have the page that I'm navigating. So if I refresh right now, we should have a page hit for this test page. So you can see here today, a page hit. And if I scroll down and then refresh here, I should have triggered another event, call it the page name fully scrolled. And I actually added a tag while doing that. And yeah, there is this public field that I created as a test. And I have inserted two here. Of course, I didn't show before, but if I, for example, click the add to cart button, nothing help here. Nothing will do here, but I'm just using that as a testing to record the click action. So you can see here, I added additional tag, product X added to cart, another page sheet, and in the details, yeah, I thought I have changed that, but no, I'll take a look on that. So basically, what I am doing is I'm recording as page view additional events, but all the event type is always page hit. And the URL is actually a made up URL. You have the refer, so where that event occurs, but the page URL, I can put it anything I want. So you can see here tags, and here I have updated this public field as well. So you can see, for example, in this example, I put the page URL scroll full screen and like add 5 points and 5. So I made this URL, and you can use this URL, to create segments or adding points, triggering points, and so on. Okay, let me finish this. This is a debug mode of the tag manager. I'll explain a little bit more about that. So how I did that implementation. So basically there are 3 tools, actually just 2 tools, and I want to discuss the third tool later. But basically I use Mautic, right, to send important events to a tracking pixel. I also use Google Tag Manager to control the logic of what to send to Mautic. Yeah, so basically those are the 2 tools that I use for the demo. So on the Mautic side, what I'm using is actually a tracking pixel, which is a GIF, that is loaded in the page, and you can provide the information that you want to send to Mautic. Right? It has more flexibility than the JavaScript function in the usual tracking script. So the URLs does not have to be real URLs. Although the example, say you're providing the email, you don't have to provide the email as long as the tracking code already identify the user. You don't need to identify when recording those events. If you record an event in an anonymous user, the event will be there as well, right? And as I said, after doing that, you can create events, create segments, creating points, actions based on that event. All right. But I guess the best way to implement that is using Tag Manager. If you don't know what Tag Manager is, just a quick overview of it. So in a site without Tag Manager, here you have all those trackings, all those libraries in your site. You have to include everyone manually, and this can be very hard to maintain, right? So here you have example of Google Analytics, Google Ads, Facebook Pixel, and Mautic would be listed here. With Google Tag Manager, you only need to add one tracking code, which for the Google Tag Manager. And this is a tag management tool that you can organize all your tags into one place. And what Google Tag Manager will do is load based on the logic that you have defined. It will load the tags that you need. Right, so you have a lot more options, and it's a lot more easy to manage, to organize, to pause some triggers, for example. Right. So let me show how I implemented here that Mautic tracking in Google Tag Manager. So yeah, so this is the Google Tag Manager. I have tags and I have triggers. So triggers basically determine when a tag will be loaded. So I can have, like, for example, a tag for all the pages during the initialization, when a page is scrolled, so I can create custom triggers. So for example, I click at the add button card. So let me create a trigger example here. So there's a lot of user behavior that you can collect and trigger the event that you want. So for example, watching a YouTube video, view a specific element, submit the form, any custom event. So there's a lot of things that can be used to trigger the events. And then you have of course the tags. So like the basic usage, you have like just, for example, this Mautic tracking. This is just the tracking code that we have regular for the for the Mautic tracking. So in here I just put it in the initialization of all pages. I usually include that, but this is just the basic stuff. So one thing you can do, you can create custom tags to share with the community. So I'm creating, for example, I'm creating one that is called with consent management. So let me see, it's probably here. So you can see here the HTML code is not in here because this is a tag template, and I just put the parameters that I want in here. And for example, the tracking the custom event, usually if you want to put directly in a page, you would do like a custom image that I have here. So this is the Mautic tracking GIF, and you put all you want to load and when you want to trigger, all right? So I'm not using this. This is just as an example. What I did, I create a custom tag to track Mautic events. And I'll be sharing that. I'm still finishing up some details, but I'll sharing that with the community. So basically what I have here is this tag, but I have to configure, just the Mautic URL, the page URL you want to trigger, and if you want to use the real URL, just leave it empty, and we'll trigger in the actual page URL. The title, like I said, you can leave it empty, or you can include. So the advantage of using a custom template of tag, you can use variables as well. So in this example, I use the page title, but I add the event that is happening. And then any public field can be added here. So in this example, I use test field public, but for example, email, I could do it, include my email, for example. And that will be sent to Mautic and update that specific field. Tags use a minus sign if you want to remove a tag. So this is the way that you can use to trigger event in Mautic, and this is the trigger, the logic behind when I will trigger this action. So in this example, scroll all page. Yeah, the other example was the button. So I call it empty event, add to cart. So you can see here the URL that I have triggered, the page title, and the triggering event. So here, like I do have a lot of options. In this example, I'm clicking on an element that match this CSS selector, just as an example. So like I said, I'm planning to publish this custom tag real soon. So I'll make sure I update the community when I do. So the last thing that I want to comment, this is a good thing to send, important events and to plan the logic in the tag manager. But if you want like more complex scenarios where you're tracking a lot of data, I still consider using Google Analytics. Google Analytics is made for this kind of stuff. Like you have custom events, you have goals, you have session and user tracking. So this is a thing that I'm still exploring, the best way to integrate Mautic with Google Analytics. So, and I think the best way is to use the user tracking in analytics. So let me show one analytic page, just a second. Okay, so this is one page that I have on analytics that I'm reviewing. So you have this user explorer section, right? And every session have a client ID, and you can change that to your own ID. You can submit an ID that you need, right? As long as you cannot, is not a identifiable ID, like it cannot be a social security number, it cannot be an email, it have to be a random ID, but and you can submit that ID. And basically, you can see all the actions here. So let me get one example of one person that actually purchased in this store. So you can see here a lot of tracking events, what pages to view, what he purchased, the checkout, the cart, when he added the cart. All the events are in here. I'm not going into much detail, but Google Analytics usually is the best tool to do this kind of stuff, better than Mautic anyway. So one thing that you can do, you can change the client ID, like I said before, or you can create custom properties. So in this case, I have not set, but you can actually send the Mautic ID to Google Analytics. And then once you have that ID inside Analytics, you can easily, cross-reference between the two tools. You could export the data or create reports and export the report, or even using the API to collect that information. And with Tag Manager, it's really easy for you to synchronize that data. So in this example, here I have it in the Google Analytics tag. So I have the ID of the tag, but I can also, like, I have custom dimensions in this example. And what I'm doing, I'm providing the Mautic ID as value, right? Another thing that I could do, I could add the user ID as well, and using the Mautic ID or any ID that I have. And this is a variable that I have created, which is basically reference to the Mautic ID. Every user have an ID here. This is mine. This is a random ID associated with that. It is used to track the activity in the website. And this ID is actually a cookie that is saved in the page that Mautic uses to track, right? So in this example, I have created a variable with a cookie type variable here, and just add the name of the cookie, and this is the name of the cookie that Mautic uses to store the Mautic ID. So once you do that, you can actually, do a cross-reference of the activities in analytics with the Mautic contact ID. All right. Thank you for watching. I hope that helps.